Welcome to East Wargaming, and we're bringing you another Heresy Thursday. This week, I've got Jason joining me once again.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be back.
It's great to have you back. We did miss you over the last couple of weeks. I know we had a video last week for the Army Review, which you were part of, but you've been overseas, right?
Well, it's a combination of factors. I've actually been down from a surgery, which thankfully I'm now recovering from. But yeah, I was in the U.S. for a couple of weeks as well and had a visit to the Warhammer Citadel. So all in all, it was a pretty good trip, but I'm excited to be back and doing this once again.
Yes, and whilst you were away, we had some exciting announcements, mainly about a new epic scale format of Horus Heresy.
Yeah, so old school players like myself remember fondly the days of Epic. I still have some Epic miniatures actually kicking around in my bits box, some old rhinos and things like this, and it's coming back to us once again. And I'm actually pretty excited about this.
Yeah, so whilst you were away, they released the preview of what Legion Imperialis was, and we've had a couple podcasts about some of their releases. And this week, we're actually going to go over the last couple weeks worth of information that they've sent us and published for what else there is in Legions Imperialis.
Yeah, there's been, if you look at the Warhammer community articles or the various sources on the internet, you're seeing a lot of the new miniatures being previewed that are coming out for the game. They're not new in the sense that they are existing 30K models, but they are new for this particular game system in a much smaller format and what looks to be really nicely done.
Yeah, you're right there. The fact is, I think we've all identified that these models aren't new sculpts, but really just scaled down sculpts. I think that was also hinted at and explained when they did their interview with two of the designers there. But it's good to see, and one of the things I'd like to see as well is there is a significant level of detail, even though we're at this scale, which is great to see if you can paint that. But the question is really how easy it will be to paint, because if I just speak to myself personally, if I'm looking at Marines in general and I'm trying to paint eyes, I struggle. Everything here seems to be at that size.
Yeah, it's tiny. It's approximately 10 millimeter. I was a Flames of War player, so I've painted a lot of stuff in a smaller scale. And what I will say is it can be as fast and quick and easy as you want it to be, or if you're really a glutton for punishment, you can put in the extra details on it. But it will paint up fast. So you could really get an entire force onto the table in just a day or two, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we've still yet to see anything about the rules and how many points a force consists of, but we've got indications from the box set they've released, which has the Space Marine force and the Solar Auxilia force there, to give you kind of an indication of the basic size of armies I think they'll be targeting in Legions Imperialis, but they keep releasing some new models to keep adding to that range.
Yeah, there's a lot of new releases that have happened in the last couple of weeks. I mean, if we take just the Space Marines themselves, we've seen the Leviathan now at this scale. We've seen Rapier carriers at this scale. We've seen some of the new tanks, whether it's the various Sicaran variants. Yeah, it's a lot of interesting stuff, and it looks like they're on track to pretty much duplicate the entire 30K range. Well, at least I hope so. Yeah, really, really nice stuff.
Yeah, last week for their Heresy Thursday, they previewed the new range of Dreadnoughts and Elites. So they showed the different versions of the small plastic Leviathans and the two types of Deredeo, so autocannon Deredeos and also plasma Deredeos there, as well as some of the things we don't see so much in 30K, the Tarantulas.
Yeah, Tarantula is kind of in 1.0 where a little bit of a hit or miss. I mean, you could do some interesting things with them, but you just didn't see them on the table that often. But it looks like they're definitely going to have a lot more use in this particular game. I mean, otherwise, why would they release them and release them or preview them as kind of the first wave, I guess, of the miniatures that are going to be available?
Yeah, even the rapiers themselves, we've seen for us in our community, we've seen their use drop quite drastically because of the change in rules, the change in toughness for them, and also some of the change in loadouts. A preference from what I think used to be the quad mortar as a stable go-to to now the las cannons, and we have both of those here.
We do. We get the laser destroyer variant, and we do get the quad mortar variant on these rapiers, which is pretty cool. It does look like at the photos that they've changed the body of the rapier just a little bit, and certainly the tarantulas have been changed a little bit as well for the scale. No big deal there. I mean, they still look great according to the pictures. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think in the full size game, rapiers are a little bit less popular, but I'm sure that they'll have their use in this particular game because, again, why would they have that as being, part of the first wave if they weren't going to be really useful?
Yeah, my personal opinion is that I think we had this discussion with some people in the community here. This is going to be a very much tank and knights focused game. But then I was also reminded most of the old Epic games were objective based, with still the same restrictions of having to use infantry to hold objectives. So it will kind of force us to keep that infantry contingent in a Legion Imperialis force.
Yeah, and they even hinted that. I mean, if you look at the article on Warhammer Community about the tanks, and including the Demos pattern rhinos, they actually have a little blurb in there in one of the paragraphs that talks about how critical it will be to get infantry onto objectives. So I'm actually kind of glad to see that, right? I mean, all of us like pushing our tanks around, in regular Heresy, and I'm sure we're going to like it in this game as well. But there's definitely going to be a place for infantry, and they've really hinted at that in that article.
Yeah, so those Legion Rhinos are what was previewed in this week's Heresy Thursday on the 27th of July. And they also previewed a few of the other tanks that we have available in full scale that they've brought back into the epic scale here. So for the Space Marines, they've got the Kratos, which, in my opinion, in the full game is was an unnecessary tank that we never really needed, though powerful. I personally have a couple in new in sprue and yet to assemble because I've yet to see a need. But we do have that now in Legions Imperialis.
Yep, we do. We get those, and it says all of the weapon options are going to be available. The main weapon, the sponsored weapons, so that's good. We also get the Bane Blade for the Solar Ox. What's interesting in the article about this is it only talks about two particular variants, which is the Bane Blade, the basic Bane Blade, or a Hellhammer. But they do have obviously different options on the sponsored weapons, the whole weapons, etc. But there's so many different variants of the Bane Blade chassis, but they don't mention anything about it here. So whether or not that means we're going to get them in the future, who's to say? But I thought that was a little bit of an interesting point in the article.
Well, the thing about the full-scale Baneblade chassis, since it's all using the same chassis, putting the different variants is just really one or two sprues for us at full scale to do this. I'd be honestly very surprised if at this epic scale, this 10mm scale, that it's too complicated for them to include it in the sprue or an accessory sprue there to have the entire array of variants. But then again, sometimes GW makes some questionable business decisions for the way they use their plastic.
Well, I could very easily see this being one of those kinds of models for release where they wait and see how well it does before they maybe put in the resources or the cost required to put out the other sprues and whatnot. I can definitely see them doing that with this game because even back in the heyday of original Epic, it wasn't like everybody was playing it. It was a really, really good game and had a very passionate fan base, but not every 40K player was playing Epic. And I'm sure that not every 30K player or 40K player is going to play this either. So maybe that just means that it's kind of a wait and see approach, and I can understand that.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. Everything they've released so far is in plastic, so there's an inherent cost for the molds there, as opposed to just doing it in resin in a smaller scale, a smaller batch scale. It would be extremely problematic and I think really unfeasible for them to get the level of quality they want to achieve for this new system out of resin there.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. I don't know. I mean, just looking at the pictures, there's no surprises. I don't really see very many little hidden, Easter eggs or anything like that in the pictures. They have said that Adeptus Titanicus models, all of them are going to be fully usable. They have said that the AI models, the aircraft, are going to be fully usable. So that's a good sign. And we did see a new heavy walker for the Solar Ox, which is brand new. We don't even have that in 30K. Hint, hint. Maybe we're going to get that in 30K in full size. Who knows? But it does seem to be kind of the core of what they're showing us so far is really the more common variants of the various vehicles or the more popular options.
Yeah, the one thing we were looking at was we were talking just before we came on the podcast. It was about the Demos pattern Rhino. I love the way the level of detail that heavy metal is coming out with these rhinos because personally, if I saw these pictures here and side by side with what they've done for some of their full scale stuff, not knowing the two different scales, it'd be quite hard to pick out some of the difference here. But also, there is some transfers that they're using on top for the Death Guard here that we're not quite sure where they're coming from.
Yeah, it looks like it. If you look at the picture, and by the way, I agree with you that these are painted really, really well, even for the scale. But if you look at the picture of the rhinos, they do have the Death Guard symbol on the top hatch. Does that mean we're going to get a new decal sheet at this scale? Don't know. They very easily could have used some of the smaller decals from the actual Forgeworld sheet because there are the smaller symbols that are meant to be placed on like the knee pad. Those are quite small, and I could very easily see that they may have used those on these particular models. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, it would make more sense to have decal sheets available at this scale for all of the legions, and it probably wouldn't be that expensive to put them out. But it doesn't seem the article mentions anything about decals themselves. Are these part of the standard set? And it's going to be featuring the Death Guard versus whoever, who knows? But yeah, that's an interesting point to look at as well.
Yeah, if they do what they've done with their other flagship army releases, where they only put two decals in the box. So, in for us in Age of Darkness, we have Sons of Horus and Imperial Fists, and I can say I have more of those small transfer sheets than I know what to do with or are able to even give away. I'd be quite disappointed if that's the case here, because again, we're trying to give access to all the legions and not just the main two here.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I hope they don't go that pattern of only offering, a couple legions in the starter set and you don't get decal access for any of the others. The good news is, coming back to my time painting a lot of Flames of War minis, decals aren't as much of a must at this particular scale. I mean, even if you're not great at freehand, and I'm not the best, you can paint a lot of the Legion symbols quite easily at this scale, or you could even draw them on with like an artist pencil or technical pens or something like that. Not too big of a deal, not a showstopper, but again, I think it would be good just for ease of use and for the whole general community to have access to decals for all the legions.
Yeah. In Age of Darkness, myself, I'm a big fan of the sculpted pauldrons, but I've also come to appreciate the decal sheets that we have from Forgeworld here for various other things. I don't use any myself for pauldrons because like I said, I prefer the sculpted pauldrons. But there's so much on these decal sheets that have uses elsewhere just for flavor and for some variety in your army.
Yeah, true. I like the sculpted pads as well. I do like the decals. It just really depends, I think, on the model because sometimes the sculpted pads do take a little bit longer to paint rather than putting on a decal. But again, at this scale, if I come back to my experience in painting it, it paints so fast, whether you have decals or not. Find a spray rattle can of your base color, hit all of your models with that spray, give them all a quick wash and dry brush to basically knock out 90% of the paint job, and then come in and do the details with your metallics or your accent color. Really, really quick to paint. The Solar Rock stuff is probably going to take you a lot longer because it seems like it's got a lot of the same trim that's available on the full-size models, and I'm sure you're going to want to pick that out. But in general, these are going to paint so fast, and you can definitely get a force on the table really, really quick.
Yeah. Speaking of painting fast, they also released some new things about the terrain and what their plans are for what you play on in this scale.
Yeah, we're big fans of terrain. Obviously, if you watch our battle reports, we like to play on really nice terrain. We think it adds a lot to the game. It's certainly enjoyable for you to watch, and it's great for us to play on. We do get a preview of the various terrain that's going to be available for this game as well, including the tiles. Um, I don't know what to think about the tiles because I like the terrain. I like the fact that we're getting some that was already used in Titanicus, and it looks like we're getting some new pieces as well. But the tiles themselves, anybody that's painted the Necromunda tiles for Zone Mortalis, they're a pain. They really are a pain, and they're not, let's face it, priced really cheaply. So depending on what size tables they want you playing on, whether or not you use the tiles, mm, it may be a hard pass for me if it requires another 6x4 or 4x4 size, and then we have to buy multiple packs of these tiles. Now, looking at them, it doesn't look like they're going to be hard to paint. They're going to be fast and easy to paint. But again, cost for me is going to be a big factor in deciding whether or not I want to use these things.
Yeah, so we talk about the Zone Mortalis tiles, and if we look at how they came initially, the Zone Mortalis tiles, you got 4 of these 1-foot tiles for $80. And here in this, you're getting 6. So I could quite easily see this being over $100 for these 6 tiles. And as you stated quite clearly, we don't know the scale of this game, but I'd be very surprised if we're playing these kind of forces on a 2x3. If anything, the 6x4 is our standard mat size, and I can see this game being on that scale as well, which means you need 4 of these packs to fill up the entire table there.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, I've become a big fan of mats, and we have a pretty sizable mat collection from a couple different manufacturers. Um, I can see some of those mats actually being quite usable even at this scale because they're very generic. Rocky terrain or ruined terrain that doesn't have the footprint of a building made onto the mat itself. I would probably go the route of using mats as well for this particular game because again, if you have to spend a couple $100 just for the tiles, that to me is a bit excessive. Um, no reason to do that. I mean, shoot, you could even put out just a neutral colored sheet in gray or, and if you jazz it up with a few of the buildings or something like this, it's going to be perfectly suitable.
Yeah, because you have to bear in mind, you have to get all new terrain for this, for Legions Imperialis. So I think that's the priority over the tiles. And personally for me, and I think for the vast majority of people, we'd prefer to spend our money on the actual ruins and the Gothic spires and towns that they've released here because they look beautiful here. And there's a lot more use you can get out of them than just the tiles.
Yeah, for sure. I think the only question that comes to my mind about the tiles and about the rule set, and we don't know yet, are there going to be specific rules around roads? Now, if there is, then that's definitely a reason why you might want to use the tiles because otherwise you're going to have to figure out some way to mark roads on your mat or whatnot. Remains to be seen. I guess we just kind of have to wait and see whether or not the tiles themselves are going to be a must-have. But coming back to your point about the terrain preview in the Warhammer community article, it looks awesome. And you can see that they've even taken some of if you remember the older Forgeworld tiles that are no longer in production that had like built-in, power generators and these kinds of things, they've taken that terrain and they've now made it available for this game. And it looks really, really, really good. So I can see it being very easy to make some beautiful tables. Really, really excited about that aspect of it because, again, we really love nice terrain.
GW do make some fantastic plastic terrain here, and again, they've not let us down for this Legions Imperialis. Pricing is going to become key. How much you get per box in terms of plastic and how much of a table it fills up. One of the things about the GW terrain now is it is getting on the pricier side for terrain, which is encouraging alternatives, especially resin alternatives, which are actually quite price competitive compared to some of these Games Workshop pieces.
Yeah. I don't disagree there. And then, of course, everybody's favorite boogeyman, 3D printing. 3D printing is almost optimal for actually making this scale of terrain. And I can see that being a popular option amongst a lot of players as well. But the terrain itself that they're showing the pictures of is really, really nice stuff. And even looking at it, like some of the cranes and things like this, these are pieces of terrain that we didn't actually see at full scale available to the public, but they were in like the Warhammer World displays. They were custom made, or they were in the photographs of the black books, some of these different cranes and things like this. And so now you have it available at this scale, and I think that's a really neat touch.
Yeah, at full scale or our standard scale there, these would be very, very big pieces.
Yes, absolutely. And I like painting terrain. We've painted so much of it for our events, and I still have a lot more to paint. But yeah, I mean, this just looks really, really cool. But again, let's see what the price is on it.
Yeah. Well, look, that's everything that they've released for the new Legions Imperialis up to date now. I'm excited about this, and I think it's going to be coming out, I think, next month, in the month of August or the month of September. I think that's when we're looking for this kind of release, because I doubt it's going to come in their Christmas releases. So it's very, very soon. But I'm also hoping they're going to start doing some Heresy Thursdays about Age of Darkness again.
Yeah, me too. You know, this is going to be something that's going to be kind of, in my mind, a great way to connect the two games, because now all of a sudden you can have perhaps a campaign system where you're playing these games at this scale to simulate the bigger battles, and then you can go more into specific missions at 28 millimeter scale, the standard scale. Um, I'm curious to see how they're going to connect the two, or if they're going to treat them as standalones, and we're going to have to figure out a way to do campaigns on our own. But I'm also with you that I also want to see more of the 28 millimeter or the heroic 28 millimeter stuff that we all know and love. And it seems like we haven't really had a lot of updates on that in the last few weeks.
Well, you make an interesting point about cross-game campaigns, and it's something at Far East Wargaming we're looking to do in the coming months. More specifically, we're looking to adapt some of the scenarios from the original Black Books and the Isvan 3 campaign to see how that can be spread as for entertainment for you guys across several different game systems, including, well, Battlefleet Gothic, originally Adeptus Titanicus, but it actually may be Legions Imperialis now, if the timing is right. And then the various different Zone Mortalis and Crusade games for Age of Darkness.
Yeah, I think it would be a big miss on their part if they didn't have some sort of connected campaign rules where you could tie the different games in. I mean, from a marketing perspective as well, I mean, that's going to encourage sales. So, yeah, it remains to be seen, because it really wasn't an official rule set that connected Titanicus to the full-scale games or AI to the full-scale games, and I hope that they do it with this. But if not, I'm sure there's some geniuses out there on the internet. They're going to come up with their own systems, and we'll just have to roll with those.
Well, only time will tell, and so I think all that's left now is for us to wait for Games Workshop to actually release this, and some pricing for us to either cherish or cry about there. But from Far East Wargaming, thanks for tuning in for another one of our Heresy Thursdays. We'll be bringing you this every week as usual, and on Mondays we'll be trying to bring you some battle reports or some other different videos for you to enjoy. But from me, Richard, at Far East Wargaming, thank you very much for tuning in.
And thanks everyone for joining us as always. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and keep those comments coming. We really enjoy the feedback and interacting with everybody. So thanks for that, and stay tuned and happy wargaming.